Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading back into the haunted houses for a truly chilling collection of scary stories. And if you would like your birthday shout out, feel free to check out the link to Patreon to find out more. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is my mother's story, and I'm telling it from her point of view. I was around 13 years old when this happened to me. Walking down the narrow hallway of our old house late one evening, when out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement ahead through the passage. There was a figure striding towards me, and my first thought was that it had to be my brother, since he was the only other person who could possibly be walking around at this late hour. Though something felt immediately off about the shape. A subtle yet profound distortion in the way it moved that twisted my stomach with an instinctive unease. So I turned around fully to face it head-on and got a clear, unforgettable look at what was approaching me through the gloom. There a man stood about 5 feet tall, dressed in a bright red shirt, tucked neatly into ordinary blue jeans, his form solid and detailed from the head down to his upper thigh, where everything suddenly shifted into eerie complete transparency. His lower body faded out like mist, dissolving suddenly in direct sunlight, legs and feet blurring into absolute nothingness before my eyes, while the upper half remained perfectly visible for one frozen heartbeat. Then he vanished entirely, without sound or disturbance, leaving nothing but the empty hallway stretching behind me barren, and still with no trace whatsoever to mask his unnatural passing. As you can imagine, fear hit me hard, because I had never seen this stranger before in my life, and no one in our family matched that description or clothing combination at all. I kept it to myself for years, too terrified to mention it to even my own mother, because admitting it out loud felt like inviting whatever it was back into our home permanently to linger indefinitely. It was not until much later, when we were packing up everything to move across the country, that I found myself on a plane sitting next to her during the long, turbulent flight, that I finally worked up the courage to tell her every detail of what happened in that hallway. She listened attentively at first, with her face paling noticeably as I described the red-shirted figure and its bizarre disappearance. Then she revealed something that chilled me far deeper than my original encounter ever had. My brother had seen the exact same man repeatedly over those years, starting around the same time I did, but experiencing it far more aggressively. That turned our house into a place of constant low-level dread, especially for him. He would catch glimpses of the figure lingering silently in the corner of his bedroom at all hours, sometimes in the dead of night, when sleep should have come easily, but never did, under that watchful eye of the stranger. The man never spoke or moved aggressively towards him directly at first, but he toyed with the environment in ways that sent ice-cold chills racing across my brother's skin every time without fail. Lights flickered on and off by themselves whenever the figure appeared nearby, switches clicking audibly without any hands touching them, while shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls from no visible source whatsoever. One particular night stood out as the worst. My brother was walking casually into his room after checking something downstairs, mind wandering to ordinary teenage thoughts, when an invisible force slammed into him hard enough to drive his shoulder straight into the wall with bruising impact. He stumbled back, gasping from the sudden shove that came out of nowhere, looking around wildly for whoever or whatever had struck him physically. But the room stood completely empty, with nothing there to explain the collision or the lingering cold spot where contact had been made. That bump marked the first truly physical encounter he endured from the entity, escalating what started as visual hauntings into something capable of interacting with the living world directly and leaving tangible marks to prove it. I explained how he had confided in me privately over time about these repeated visitations, always describing the same red-shirted man with thighs fading into transparency just like mine. Though I have dismissed it initially as overactive imagination, until the physical incidents became impossible to ignore any longer. Knowing now that both of us had crossed paths with the same apparition independently, made the house feel tainted forever. We never learned who or what the figure truly represented. Perhaps some lost soul bound to the property, a warning from beyond, or something drawn to the vulnerabilities of adolescence. I suppose that's for you to decide. This happened about 2 years ago, and I still can't quite figure out what it was. My great-grandmother lives in this old house, which was built approximately 130 years ago. It's about a 15-minute drive from the city to get there, and as a kid, I hated that house. My parents would always drop me off at her house for the whole summer, even though I'd been telling them I didn't want to go there. I loved spending time with my grandma, but I physically could not sleep in that house. It's like it was full of this weird bad energy that wouldn't leave me in peace. Fast forward, I grew up and I only visited my grandma during the day, still not wanting to sleep in that damn house. However, once my great-grandpa died, I didn't want to leave her alone for the night, and she refused to sleep over at my place. So I had no choice but to stay there. I also invited my at-the-time boyfriend, thinking I'd feel more safe with him. Both of us slept on the couch in the living room, our heads pointing towards the door. So I remember that it was around 1 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, so I was on my phone. My boyfriend was already asleep, so I told myself it was time to put my phone away and try to actually get some winks. I did so, and for approximately 5 minutes everything was good, until I heard those old wooden floors creaking. I stayed put, listening with my eyes closed, thinking it was my grandma. Then the door to the living room we were in opened, and I heard the old cabinet doors creaking, as if someone had opened them. I immediately thought that it was my grandma, and that she was not feeling good, since that was a pill cabinet and my grandma had a heart problem. I didn't get up or open my eyes, I just asked, "Grandma, is everything fine?" But I got no reply. I still heard the rumble near the door, as if she were trying to find the right pill. So I said it again. "Grandma, do you need something? Everything all right?" After I received no reply again, I sat up, turned my head towards the door. Right then, I jumped into the other side of the couch and began screaming. That was not my grandma. It was a dark, hunched-back silhouette and it had no face. It looked like an old lady in some way, just standing there staring at me. And as soon as I screamed, my boyfriend jumped up and turned the lights on. It just disappeared. Then my grandma came in. I think my screams woke up the whole village. Neither of them believed me. They said I was probably dreaming or hallucinating, but I swear on my life I actually saw it. To this day, I begged my boyfriend to leave the lights on for the rest of the night, and I didn't close my eyes for a second that night, and left immediately in the morning. After doing some research on the house, I found out the first owner of the house was an old lady that died in the hallway of a heart attack in 1922. I don't know. Maybe it was her ghost lurking around the house. Either way, to this day, I have no idea what it was, and for the next 4 months after it happened, I couldn't sleep with the lights off. Just remembering this terrifies me. For context, I grew up in a small town of a maximum 300 people. in a town with a fairly troubled history. Cave in Rock, Illinois. For those unfamiliar, Cave in Rock is not just the name of the town, but the name of the feature state park. There is a cave in the bluff that runs beside the Ohio River where cave pirates would dress as women and lure in riverboats, then murder the pilot and occupants and take their valuables. The town also has strong ties to the American frontier first documented serial killers, the Harp brothers. My family have all had different paranormal stories from the area, but I would like to focus specifically on my aunt and uncle's house. Now, growing up, ages 1 to 8, I frequently stayed with my aunt and uncle and grandparents. Luckily for me, they lived next door to each other on a hill not far away from the ferry landing, the shortcut into Cave in Rock from Marion, which also meant they were fairly close to the banks of the Ohio River and the cave itself. Almost all my family members who stayed in that house have distinct and unforgettable memories of paranormal occurrences from their time there. My aunt and uncle, on more than one occasion, had the pull chain to their ceiling fan and light above their bed audibly pull and for the light to turn on while they were watching TV in the living room. There was another time the same thing happened while they were both in bed. Mind you, the ceiling fan was centered above their bed, and you wouldn't be able to pull the string without standing in the middle of the bed. They would come home from shopping, and sometimes all the doors and windows, including cabinets, would be open. My own experiences are as follows. Once, while staying with my uncle, for reference this was the late 90s, early 2000s, my uncle had a very large stereo system in his house, with tower speakers. The remote was missing and we were trying to find it. While looking for the remote, the recliner fully reclined as if someone was sitting in it, and the stereo turned on and turned up to full volume. That was freaky enough. There was another time I was staying with my cousins, and being a kid we shared a bed. We were woken up in the middle of the night to their Dalmatian barking at the rocking chair, the one my cousin had in the corner of her room. When we woke up, the chair was rocking on its own, and the dog was losing his mind at it. Being a kid, she, my cousin, just told me everything was okay and not to be concerned by it. But my last experience still sticks with me. My last personal paranormal experience in that house went as follows. My mother and I went to visit my aunt and uncle. My aunt and uncle took my mother to show her something and left me in the living room. I got a really bad feeling and took about 2 steps before it felt like something wrapped around me. Everything went quiet. I couldn't talk, I couldn't move, and I could not scream no matter how much I tried. I have no idea to this day how long it lasted. I just remember my mum coming back into the room and asking if I was okay. But all I could do was cry. Well, I'm 31 years old now, and I still have several unanswered questions about what I experienced in that house as a kid. My aunt and uncle moved out of there when I was around 8, so it's been at least 23 years since they lived there. I recently had to go back home for a funeral and have a grandmother on my father's side who was the most religious and straightforward woman I've ever known. We are all eating lunch at the funeral, and she comes over and sits next to my aunt and uncle and myself. Mind you, I've been around this woman my entire life, and she has never once mentioned anything paranormal, and she asks my aunt and uncle if, when they lived in their house, anything unexplainable ever happened. So she told her the story of our encounters, and I watched her whole expression change. Now, it's 27-ish years later, and the current owner is still experiencing paranormal phenomena, to the point he came to my grandmother and the church and asked if she knew anything or could help him. Part of me wants to go back and talk to the current owner, and possibly stay in the house and see it all again. But another much louder part of my brain is feeling that it's in the past for a reason. Anyway, this is just the tip of the paranormal iceberg that was my childhood in southern Illinois. But if you are from the area, I ask, have you ever seen something you can't explain? And also, what would you do in my situation? This is about my mother, who had a paranormal encounter during her childhood. When she was a kid around 5 to 7 years old, my grandparents moved into a new house that was actually right next door to the house they live in now. When they first moved in, the woman they bought the house from already seemed a bit strange, but they didn't think much of it. After a few months, my mum started experiencing weird things in her room, such as hearing footsteps when no one was there, or hearing things fall even though nothing had actually fallen. My grandparents would yell at her, thinking she was the one making noise at night, and she would get grounded. Obviously, when you're a kid and your parents tell you something like that, they're gonna think you're making it up. One day, however, my grandpa heard the noises himself. He walked upstairs, opened my mum's bedroom door, and saw something he shouldn't have. The string on the ceiling fan was curled up, and the rocking chair was moving at an extremely fast speed, like it was being shaken back and forth over and over again. He saw my mum pressed up against the wall, terrified. Then suddenly, everything stopped, like someone snapped their fingers. He got my mum out of the room, went into his bedroom closet, and started praying to God that whatever paranormal experience had happened would go away. The next day, my grandparents were curious about what could have caused it. While my mum and her brothers were at school, they ripped up the carpet in that room and found what appeared to be a summoning circle underneath it. It looked like it had been written in old, dried blood and salt. Long story short, it turned out that the woman they bought the house from was a witch who had performed rituals in that very room. They brought in a priest who prayed over the house repeatedly until finally the evil presence was lifted. We moved into a house in Toronto, and as the kids were very young, my parents looked after them while we got the place cleaned up properly and set up the house. Nothing out of the ordinary apart from really odd vibes of dread whenever I was in the kitchen. I ignored it and went about unpacking. My husband had a blue jumpsuit that had been a gag gift, so when I was unpacking our clothes, I tossed it into the back of the closet top shelf. It popped back down, so I tossed it again and popped it out. I rolled it in a ball and threw it into the back, and went down the hall to joke to my husband, who was in the kitchen, that the house was rejecting our stuff. I walked back into the bedroom and froze, with every hair standing on end, and I felt sick. The jumpsuit was laid out and fully spread flat on the bed, about 8 feet from the closet. I was pretty unsettled, but my husband convinced me that maybe I was mistaken and had left it there, or that it had miraculously fell and unrolled itself in that exact manner. I ignored my gut and got busy unpacking the bathroom things and recaulking the poorly done bathtub. After I finished, I rejoined my husband and we sat down to take a breather in the living room. The cushion I sat on felt like it moved under me, and I got pretty freaked out. So my husband calmed me down and suggested that fumes might be messing with me on top of being tired. I agreed it was possible and sat on the couch again. This time something grabbed me like being poked with a hand hard, pushing me up. I squealed, and we considered maybe a rodent had got in from the moving truck. We even left and got traps just in case. 2 days later, we moved the kids in and our 5-year-old was unable to sleep, claiming that every time he closed his eyes all he could see were flames, endless fire and a man standing in it. It creeped us out, but we moved on with life. Then my husband, and myself started getting really disturbing imagery while drifting off to sleep, or while waking from it. That in-between sleep stage became really unsettling with imagery of violence, death, and torture, and we had both never experienced anything like it. One night topped it all though. I woke up to our 2-year-old daughter really crying, like when something is painful or very wrong. I ran into her room, and over her crib was a dark shadow blocking the nightlight glow on the wall. It was up by her mobile made of paper birds. I reached in and scooped her up, and noticed the usually moving mobile was completely still. I blew a big puff of air towards it, and it neither moved nor did the shadow. It was solid. I was terrified, but really angry at the same time that anything was upsetting my children. I yelled firmly, "Okay, that's enough," and went back to my room to settle my daughter and put her into our bed. And for good measure got my son from his room and put him into our bed as well. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. My husband didn't see the shadow, but seeing me that frightened had him pretty freaked out too. Oddly enough, when we got a rescue cat, things seemed to calm down, but the heavy vibe remained in the kitchen. We moved after the lease ended, but neither of us have experienced anything like it before or since. I'm here to share some stories that happened to me while I was a teenager in the middle of Illinois. So I'm from a small town. At the time of this story, the population was like 2,500, and currently it's sitting at about 1,000, so it's really small. The town was founded in the year 1850, and in the 1880s the railway came through the town and it had an economic boom. But the house was officially here before the town was actually settled in. It was an old farmhouse at the start, then slowly became a hotel after the railroad came in. It was a massive 2-story house with 12 bedrooms and a massive basement with its own freshwater well. The owners were a family called the Miller family, a rich farming family for the time and very affluent in the town after the railroad boom. Later in the 1800s it became a farmhouse again, but was rumored to be a brothel, then a funeral home, where they did all the embalming and displaying the bodies for service while the families continued to live in the house. The Miller family owned it until around the 1900s, and then tuberculosis happened, pretty much wiping the family out. It was especially tragic for 2 people, James Miller, a raging, violent alcoholic and racist. I'm unsure if he was the patriarch of the family or just a relative, and Sarah Miller, age 12, the youngest daughter of the family. It is unknown exactly when they died, but from some of the things we found in the house, it would appear that Sarah died first, then James around 1901. After the TB outbreak, the records pretty much go dark until the remaining Miller family sells the house and land to the city in the year of 1910. It was then turned into a hotel for railroad workers, sold to random families and sold back, and when the railroad died in the 50s, it was left abandoned for about 60 years until the city sold it to a family that decided to turn it into a small commercial haunted house. When they first decided to make this house into a haunted house attraction, they needed to gut it and give it a fresh start. In the process of renovating, they found letters, notes, and personal items in the walls, in the attic, in the ceiling, in the outside pit. Mostly bottles and trash in there though, and then things started happening. Little things like their tools being moved, footsteps, they might hear things being dropped. The owners are huge ghost nerds, so this was the coolest stuff to them. It stayed relatively calm until a few years later when I came to work for them. The popularity grew, so every year we had to change the theme, which usually meant more renovations and gutting. My first real experience there was during a massive spring thunderstorm. We all decided to just take a break. We were talking, and we heard a large crash come from the back of the house. The owner's ladder and tools were tossed and scattered throughout the room, and the room was freezing cold. While we were in there, looking around in bewilderment, another worker goes, "We should go upstairs." We do, and the room we finished working on and decorated was destroyed. The curtains were ripped down. The chew cans that were used for decorations got thrown into other rooms. The wheelchair was upside down. In short, trashed. We ended up packing up early and leaving. Everything was calm for about a year. The haunting season went off without a hitch, and it was a blast. But the next summer was when things kicked off. This summer is what I like to call the spooky summer. The owner is a big dude, like an ex-professional wrestler, and has to turn sideways to get past some big doors. I show up one morning to help finish cleaning out the basement for storage, and I see him on the porch with a 1,000-yard stare looking terrified, and a sizable bruise forming on his forehead. He tells me he got sucker punched by a ghost. At first I don't believe it, and he said he opened the basement door and got hit by a wave of ice-cold air and heard a loud, exhaling sound, and then feels a massive fist hitting him in the head. He gets knocked back and falls on his ass. Instinctively he stands up to fight, since he immediately thought it was a human who just punched him, realizes no one's there, and he just leaves and locks the door behind him. I start to believe him when I saw the knot forming on his head. Later that same day, we were cleaning out the basement, and my friend at the time was like, "I'm gonna check out this hole that leads under the other part of the house." Why? Because he didn't want to carry heavy things up the stairs. So he's back there when he says he found something and brings it out. It's a few big glass jugs with some liquid inside, and while we're all like, "That's cool but weird," we hear a crash from upstairs. The rocking chair that was at the top of the second floor is now at the bottom of the stairs. A few weeks after that, we're finishing up for the day, and I'm talking to the owner, putting tools up, and I feel a burning sensation on my back, like it really hurts. I think I'm being bitten by a bug or something, and I take my shirt off to see that I was scratched down my back, deep but not enough to cause bleeding, but the marks were still there a few hours later. I understandably freak out and leave, as do they. When we closed the door, we ended up hearing a bunch of stuff being thrown around and dragged. The next day we came back, and the place was a mess again. During that summer, we started trying to talk to the ghosts more, and trying to investigate the haunting. We left tape recorders, a book with some crayons, video cameras, the usual stuff. We would catch some voices of a man and a little girl. The man was louder, but the girl said more. There was one time we walked in and saw the books were scribbled in. It seemed like every time the man talked, there would be stomping and something being dropped after. It hit its climax during October of that year. We had a fake wall built and had pictures on the wall that would drop down so we could scare people. It was great. After we closed for the night, we did a walkthrough of the house to make sure everyone was out. One of the workers liked to joke and talk crap to the ghosts. He'd say stuff like, "I'm half Cherokee, and you don't scare me," or would just straight up insult it. Always a good idea. I'm standing out smoking with the other workers, and we see 3 dudes run out the house screaming. The crap talker walks out and says he just got punched in the chest and knocked to the floor. Lo and behold, he has a bruise the size of a fist forming on his chest. Again, I don't believe it, since he was a massive exaggerator, but this dude was pissed, like really pissed. I tried to lighten the mood and make a joke about taking his soda can from him. He took the unopened soda can, crushed it with his hands. The dude was pretty mad about being hit by something he couldn't see. At that point, the very loud and proud anti-church atheist owner said he would call every single religious organization he could find to come and remove him from the house, and said that if he didn't work, he would demolish the house, which would be for safety and money reasons about 8 years later. After that October, it kinda chilled out. There were still some things that were scary, but not as intense. I went to college that next year, so I lost touch with them, and don't really know if anything else extreme happened. I'm going to clarify that there were no animatronics in the house during this summer or the year after. We built most of the props ourselves, and did the renovations ourselves. Plus, I wouldn't trust the owner with electricity to build his own. He was good at building, but certainly not wiring. One of my best friends when I was growing up lived in the most haunted area in our town, an Indian burial type place. My friend Rachel was constantly talking about how her house was haunted and how strange things would happen or she'd hear noises. Now, from my perspective, her house was awesome. Along with her neighborhood being haunted, it also happened to be one of the nicest developments. Older, but it was well respected. To say the least, I loved going to her house. And to top it off, her mum was the ultimate stay-at-home mum. She decorated for everything, and she would bake the best homemade apple pies and throw the most fun holiday parties. Rachel would often have us over for school projects and slumber parties. Needless to say, I spent a fair amount of time in this house and surrounding area. Now, to the night this story is about. It was another one of Rachel's slumber parties. I can't remember exactly what the occasion was, however I knew her dad was out of town. The day's activities came and went, and it was time for sleep. We had Rachel's room packed full of air mattresses, and there was not an inch of floor visible. I was on an air mattress by her door, which was open. Her door was always open at night, and in the hallway at the top of the stairs, they, her family, had an industrial fan thing that they would turn on at night to make noise, and they did this because of the noise the house would make on its own. Prior to this night, I had not personally heard any type of questionable noises in the house, and honestly, I couldn't stand the noisemaker at night, which definitely made it difficult for me to fall asleep. So on this night, I was again having difficulties falling asleep. Now, from the position I was on the air mattress, I could not see Rachel's bedside clock, and this was a time before everyone had iPhones, so I didn't know what time it was. As I just laid there listening to the annoying constant hum of the dumb fan, at some point, I heard Rachel's mum walk out of her room and down the stairs. I knew it was Rachel's mum because her door and her parents' door faced each other at the top of the stairs, and in between the two rooms, that was where the fan/noisemaker was. I also knew it was Rachel's mum because her dad was out of town, and all the other girls were still asleep in the room with me. Still unable to sleep, I heard what I could only assume to be Rachel's mum making breakfast downstairs. She would make the best chocolate chip pancakes, and would even have powdered sugar out to give you the perfect dusting if you wanted it. Excited for these pancakes, I couldn't stop thinking about them, and was now wide awake with anticipation. Some time passed, again with no view of the clocks, and I couldn't tell you for sure how much of it had passed, but I knew it seemed odd. I had shifted myself so I had a clear view of the top of the stairs, and as I was waiting for her to come back up to wake us all for breakfast, again more time passed. Warm rays of the morning light started to creep through the blinds in Rachel's room, and the windows at the bottom of the stairs, giving them the most welcoming glow. Fixated on the stairs, my heart stopped, and a chilling breath fell over me. That's when I saw her walk out of her room and down the stairs. I knew for a fact she had not come back up the stairs from when I had originally heard her walk down. And when I say I heard her walk down them, I mean I heard footsteps leave her bedroom, which had internally caught my attention, and then heard her walk down the stairs step for step. There were 2 steps on that staircase that had a very prominent squeak, and it did not matter where on the step you placed your foot, they always squeaked, and I heard them. Now I started to smell the sweet aroma of her cooking. Pancakes and bacon. Smells that I had not smelled earlier when I heard the commotion in the kitchen, which I had previously believed to be my friend's mother. Frozen with the now deafening realization of what I have experienced, her mother walked up the stairs to come and wake us all for breakfast. Nothing more happened on this particular day. However, after that night, I started to have more and more supernatural experiences in that house. When I was around 4 years old, my family had to move out of our home temporarily while it was being rebuilt. During that time, we had to rent a place with my uncle's family. So it was me, 4-year-old female, my mom of 27 and my dad of 35 in one house with my uncle of 43 and his wife of 42 and my female cousin of 6 in the house connected to ours through a very odd room. The house was anything but normal. Though it was located in the middle of the city, it felt completely out of place. There was a big door which opened to a gravel-covered hill that sloped downwards, and at the bottom of the hill stood 2 very old houses side by side. The houses had floor-to-ceiling windows which looked over the woods in front of it. From the very first night we began experiencing unsettling events, from hearing footsteps on the gable roof, to our neighbours calling the police after spotting a figure they believed was a thief, only to watch him vanish into the woods, which were considered part of the property. We stayed there for 4 years, and during those 4 years all of us experienced different things, some more horrid than others, like my uncle seeing a figure, and then a few months later my cousin seeing the exact same figure, and this couldn't have been her imagination, since he had never told her what he had seen. Or like my dad feeling someone sleeping right next to him all cuddled up, while all alone in the house one night. However, my mom went through the worst out of all of us. Different things kept happening. At first, she kept having visions and those things happening exactly an hour later. She thought she was going mad. Then whenever she was alone at home, pictures kept falling off the wall. Then things got worse. Whenever my mum left the house, odd things would happen to my father. For example, getting violently thrown down the window off the basement while he was exercising in the yard. He swears he was pushed. Or getting horrible scratches all over his body from his legs to his back, and even on his face. But the most horrible thing was my mum losing my brother. 2 years after moving into that house, my mum gave birth to my baby brother. When my brother was around 6 months old, something terrifying happened. One day my mum was lying next to him on the bed, when she suddenly realized he was gone. In a panic, she looked over at his crib thinking maybe she had dozed off and never actually brought him into the bed. But the crib was empty too. She searched the entire room but found nothing. Desperate, she ran out of the house to my uncle's, hoping my aunt had taken him to let my mum rest. But no one was home. She rushed back to our house, grabbed the phone and called my dad, only to find my brother peacefully asleep on the bed, exactly where she thought he'd been all along. One particularly chilling incident happened when I was around 7 and my brother was just 1 year old. My mum, my brother and older cousin, who would visit occasionally, and I were all sitting in that strange bedroom, waiting for my dad to come pick us up for a shopping trip. My brother was sitting quietly on the floor in front of my mum's dresser, which had a large mirror mounted on top. Suddenly, without warning and without the mirror falling, it shattered. Shards of glass began raining down onto my brother as if it was coming from nowhere. Eventually, when my mum could no longer bear the strange events, she visited a psychic. They told her that there were ghosts in the house, and that one of them had fallen in love with her. According to them, that was why my dad kept getting hurt whenever she left the house for more than a few hours. The psychic promised to take care of it, and for a while, things did improve. My mum stopped having visions, and my dad remained unharmed. But even then, the house never truly felt light. It always felt like something unseen lingered just outside our field of vision. I'm 26 now and I'm back living in that neighborhood, I occasionally go over to the house. The gravel hill has been paved over with asphalt, and the woods that once stood in front of the house have vanished, replaced by rows of apartment buildings. The house itself still stands, but it feels out of place, almost swallowed by the modern world around it. And yet, I still dream about it, at least once a week, without fail. The memories cling to me as if I've never truly left. I think about it often. There's a pull I can't quite explain, as though something in that house is still calling to me. I want to go back, but someone else lives there now, and the woods are gone. But still the feeling remains. I don't know what it is, but I know it hasn't let go of me completely yet. I grew up believing our house couldn't possibly be haunted, because my dad and granddad built it from scratch. There were no previous owners, no tragic history to speak of. It was just our place, and that illusion died this week. I'm 21 now, still living here with my parents while I finish college, and my whole life I've known that my aunt, my dad's sister, died from an overdose before I was born. It was always spoken about, something that happened back then. No one really ever mentioned it. I found out only a few days ago that she didn't die somewhere far away at all like I had imagined, but on our living room, on our granddad's old couch. The same couch that used to sit under the big window when I was a kid. The same spot I always thought was just a bit weird, but I wrote it off because no one ever died in this house. I used that line to calm myself down for years, but it turns out I was wrong every single time. When I was little, most of the weirdness came in dreams. I remember one specifically, a vivid image of a full-on knight in shining armor, standing in my doorway just watching. It sounds funny now, but as a kid I had this bizarre fear of knights for some reason, and seeing one so clearly in that liminal space between sleep and waking was terrifying. It was far too detailed to be just a dream. The metal, the way the light hit the armor, the posture. But I learned to file things like that under my brain being weird. As I got older, the experiences stopped feeling like dreams and started feeling uncomfortably real. When I was around 16, I went through a phase of working on what I'd call my intuition and clairvoyance. It was mostly just meditation, listening to my gut, and paying attention to the strange feelings I got. I did all of that in this house, and at first, it was exciting, but it didn't stay that way for long. I started hearing things, not always words, sometimes just a sense, a pressure or a presence in the room with me when no one else was home. And one night I was completely alone in the house, drifting off in bed, when I woke up to a loud whisper right in my ear calling my name. It was not a muffled sound through the wall, nor a TV in another room. It was right next to my head. This made me sit bolt upright with my heart hammering. I checked the hallway, the living room, every room, doors locked. There was no one home. After a few experiences like that, I stopped trying to develop any ability I might have. I still consider myself intuitive, but I drew a line. I made myself a rule. I do not want to see anything. I could handle feelings and sounds, but that weird inner knowing. When I was around 19, I was dating someone who had a dream that felt too real as well. In it, I was lying face down on my bed in my room. My boyfriend at the time was standing beside the bed facing me, like he was watching over me while I slept. Then in the dream, an arm slid out of the crack between my mattress and the side of the bed and grabbed my arm, starting to pull it down into that space. The panic I felt in that dream was enough to wake me up. I snapped into consciousness in that exact same position, face down, arm hanging off the bed. My arm was numb and tingling like it had fallen asleep, so I looked down first, expecting maybe to see that I'd just pinned it under myself or something, but nothing was there. Just that strange, prickling sensation. My body felt half paralyzed. I could move, but it was sluggish. like I was still partially stuck in whatever I'd just been released from. Then I did one thing I'd always sworn that I didn't want to do. I turned my head to the side where my boyfriend had been standing in the dream, and that's where I saw a face. Not a full solid figure, more like a transparent head and shoulders kneeling beside my bed, leaning in towards me with a smile. We were eye to eye. I could see enough detail to know it wasn't a trick of the light. It looked directly at me, smiling in this way that was just wrong for the situation, and before I could blink, it slowly faded into nothingness. I didn't wake up again. I was already awake. I threw myself out of bed and went straight into the living room where my dad was sitting. I told him everything I'd seen. I could tell from the look on his face that he believed it. He could see just how terrified I was, how there was no part of me that thought this was just a dream. He's intuitive too, though he doesn't like to talk about it, or entertain anything paranormal. But I could see the worry in his eyes that night. More recently, I was home alone taking a bath. My mum had just left to go to the grocery store and I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the bathroom. They were so clear and so normal sounding that I just assumed she'd forgotten something and come back in. I shouted through the door, asking if she'd already finished at the store or hadn't left yet, but there was no answer. I called out again, louder this time, because at this point it felt rude that she wouldn't respond. Still nothing. Just the steady sound of someone walking back and forth outside the bathroom, and the hairs on my arm stood on end. I grabbed my phone and called my mum. Her phone started ringing from the kitchen, and the footsteps stopped instantly. For a moment I felt relieved. I thought, oh, she must just be in there grabbing her phone. Maybe she forgot and came back. But the phone kept ringing, and no one picked up. No one called back. Just a ringing phone in an empty house. I called my dad the next day, trying to keep my voice steady, and he told me that he and my mum had gone to the store together, and that my mum had forgotten her phone at home. I know how all of this sounds written out, and I know how it felt in that moment. These are just the two biggest things that have happened recently, and they both happened in a house I spent years telling myself was safe because no one had ever died here. Finding out my aunt did destroyed me. My dad has his own experiences here too, and because he's wired like I am, he picks up on things he doesn't even want to. I don't know if what is here is my aunt, or something that was attached to her, or whatever. But the place I grew up doesn't feel normal anymore. Perhaps it never did. I live with my stepmom, dad, little sister and brother. There's always been weird, unexplained noises, shadows, and the feeling of being watched here. But this takes the cake. It all started with just random noise and weird sounds that progressively got worse. The first sign was shadows that you catch with the side of your eye, and no one being there. Then weirder things like hearing something climb up my bunk bed ladder, and my bed bouncing like someone had hopped in. But today when I got off work, there was only my little brother's truck at home. We have a loud stereo in our room, and we jam it loud when no one's home. Anyway, he was the only one there. That's what I thought anyway. So I get off work, see his truck and think, I guess he's home. But he wasn't. When I get close to the house, I could hear this stereo really loud, but couldn't make out the song that was playing. And as I touched the door to open it, it was dead silent. And the door to our room was wide open. I'm scared at this point. I slowly make my way through the corridor, and I stand in the doorway of our room, peering in. But there was no one there. I laugh out loud and say, "Bro, this isn't funny. Where are you?" But there was no reply to my plea. The moment I then step foot through the doorway, the door is slammed shut behind me, and I am pushed into the room and onto the floor. I get up real fast, throw open the door, but there was no one there. I look everywhere in the house and there was not a human there. So I called my brother and asked, "Where the hell are you hiding?" And he replied, What are you talking about? I'm at church. I rode in with Mum. Okay. I'll join you. Mind you, I hate church. No offense to those religious. And I'm thinking when I get home, he's still going to be there hiding. But nope. When I get there, he was at church. He could tell I was scared. When I told him what happened, he went as white as a ghost. And he said, "Last night I heard a sound while you were asleep. I went to check it out and saw a little girl in the living room watching the TV. And it was just fuzz. When she saw me, she smiled real creepy and ran into a wall and vanished." I have no idea what to do now. Everyone in the house knows it's haunted, but it's a big house and we got it for cheap so we can't move. Anyway, that's my story. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's collection of haunted house stories, and after many of your suggestions and comments, I am going to be doing Cryptid Week all next week, so I'd really appreciate it if you tuned in for that. I'd like to extend one final thank you to my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen for their continued support of the channel. And if you'd like to support the channel, follow the link to find out more. But that's it from me. Till next time, stay awesome, and I'll see you on Thursday. Good night.